Hello there, my fellow music lovers, and welcome to the channel. Thank you so much for checking out this video. And in this one, I'm going to be giving you my 2018 rear end review, the year in music. I'm going to be talking about some of the highlights and the lowlights of this past year. Some of the stuff I've already kind of covered in previous videos. Some stuff I never got a chance to. It kind of flew under the radar, never had time to really do it, or whatever. So it's going to be kind of a mixed bag. But I'm going to be, talking about things like what was the biggest surprise of this past year? What was the biggest disappointment? What was the best song? The best album? What was maybe the best cover song? What was the best music video? What was my most watched video? We're going to talk about all that. Then I'm going to go into some songs that I thought were really good over the past year, songs that I was listening to. I'm going to share that with you. And then we're going to say goodbye to some greats that we lost. Okay, so that's all coming up. This is going to be probably a pretty long video, so just going to warn you now. And, one of the things that I kind of noticed was that when I was growing up, back in the 70s and 80s, maybe even into the 90s, I kind of felt like I had a pretty good grasp on what was released in any given year. I felt pretty good that I had heard most everything that came out. Those days are gone. It seems like nowadays there's so many outlets, there's so many genres and subgenres and everything that I feel like I only am getting like a dribble as to what is out there, like I'm scratching the surface. And I guess that can be good and that can be bad. It's bad because, I don't feel like I really have heard most of everything that's come out, or don't even know about a lot of things that even came out. But on the other hand, you can learn from others, and people can share what they liked, and you can kind of turn people on. And I think that's always a good experience too. And like I said, I always appreciate hearing what you guys are digging and what you guys are listening to. So be sure to put in the comments below anything that you really loved about this past year, and I'll definitely go check it out. All right, so the first one on my list is going to be the biggest surprise of 2018. What was it for you? Was there something that happened this year that really shocked you and surprised you? I know for me, it was the return of Steve Perry. And I did a few videos about Steve this past year. The first one that I did was kind of like a where the hell is Steve and what's going on kind of video. And, because there has been all kinds of rumors about him doing an album, getting back with Journey, doing all kinds of stuff, but he really wasn't doing anything. He even went to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame when they got inducted with Journey, and there was no performance. He didn't even sing with them. So it was really like, okay, is Steve Perry just done? Is he retired? And then he shows up this year, and he drops an album on us and all kinds of interviews. We've heard all kinds of, stories that he's given us about his personal life that we never really anticipated. And we kind of learned where he's been for the past 20 years. And I did a video about that. I'm not going to get into it. Otherwise, this video would be like 3 hours long if I have to give the backstory on every single thing. But suffice to say, he made a promise to his former girlfriend, Kelly Nash, who, when he started dating her, she was terminal. She had terminal cancer. And she made him promise, that he will not be a recluse when she passes away. She wanted him to get in front of his fans and to make music again. And, she saw that he had a gift and she wanted him to give it. And so when she passed away, he took time to mourn, and then he started to feel the voice inside himself, and he wanted to record these songs that he had been working on for years, and he finally put this album out called Traces. And Traces is an album that's really more for his hardcore fans, the ones who have been really waiting for him and would pretty much buy anything that he put out. If you're a fan of Journey, you're a fan of the rock stuff that he's been doing or has been known for, it's probably not your album. The album, for the most part, is filled with a lot of ballads. It's a reflective album. It has a lot of hope in it, but it's also can be very sad. And so, the appeal is going to be somewhat limited. And, we'll see what happens to Steve going forward as to what he does next. He hasn't performed. He has yet to perform, even on a television show. He didn't even perform a song or two. So hard to say what he's going to be doing next in terms of a performance or a tour. But I'm glad to see him back, because how many other artists do you know of, that we've been kind of waiting for, who finally show up? How many other artists at Steve Perry's level are out there that we're kind of hoping make a return, that are so popular that they can appeal, from kids all the way up to seniors. Steve Perry was that person, and that once in a lifetime kind of reappearance happened in 2018. So glad to see Steve Perry back on the scene. All right, so next up on the list is going to be the biggest disappointment of 2018. Was there something that you were looking forward to this year and then you felt let down by it? I know for me, it was the Queen film, the Queen biopic, Bohemian Rhapsody. There was a lot of anticipation for this film. The trailer came out back in the spring, I think, and it looked great, and it really got people really just whipping them up for this film, which came out not too long ago, actually. And while I thought the movie was entertaining, it was well cast, the music is great, it was not very accurate at all. I mean, it had so many problems. There were timeline things going on. You had the band being upset with Freddie going solo to the point where they broke up, and apparently they didn't play for years before Live Aid, which is complete bullshit. They had just gotten off of a tour about 2 or so months before Live Aid. And then the biggest thing was they show Freddie going to the doctor, being told that he has AIDS, and then he confronts the band when they're at the rehearsal for Live Aid, telling them that he has AIDS. And I mean, totally inaccurate. Freddie didn't even know he had AIDS until like 1987, 2 years after Live Aid. So the whole thing, all this drama was all made up, and it doesn't need to be. I mean, the Queen story is filled with drama. It's filled with everything. And they didn't have to make it up. They just chose to present Queen in a certain light. And they wanted to rewrite history, and they want to basically, sanitize a lot of what went on, especially with Freddie's personal life. And so looking at it from that point of view, it was a disappointment. And what I really hope is that it doesn't set a precedent going forward. We're going to see probably a lot more bands up on the big screen. You're going to see a lot more of these films, because this film, like Bohemian Rhapsody, has gone on to become the biggest biopic, the biggest music biopic ever. And so believe me, people are taking notice. Who's going to be the next band? They're scrambling now to see what script we can get to put some other band up on the screen. And I don't like that. They're pretty much being told, look, we can put you up on the big screen, we can do this, and we can make up shit, and we can distort this and leave this out, and people will still go see it, So I don't like that. I hope that doesn't happen. But I just wasn't crazy about the movie. And I want to know what you guys think about it. Put it down below. Was that one of the biggest disappointments for you this past year? All right, so the next one up is going to be the best concert that I saw this past year, 2018. What was it for you? Did you go see any shows this year? Which was your favorite? I know for me, I saw a number of shows. I actually loved them all. I didn't see anything that was bad. But I think the Judas Priest Deep Purple double bill this past summer was probably my favorite. And maybe it's because it was the one that surprised me the most. I went in with very low expectations. Both of these bands have their issues. Judas Priest, of course, they lost their founding guitar player, Glenn Tipton. He's got Parkinson's, so he can't play live much. And so he was replaced by the producer of their new album, Andy Sneap. And you've got, of course, Richie Faulkner on guitar. He was really, really good. The whole band was firing on all cylinders, and a real enjoyable show. Rob Halford was great. Really enjoyed the whole Judas Priest set. And then Deep Purple, I was concerned, these guys are like 70 years old. They're really getting old. How are they going to sound? And they were really on point. They sounded amazing. Ian Pace, great on drums. Roger Glover, Ian Gillan. And you also had Steve Morse. I'm sitting there thinking to myself, You know, those bastards at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they won't induct Steve Morse along with Deep Purple. That's like a criminal act. You know, the guy's been with them for 20 years. He's one of the best guitar players on the planet. He should be in there. Morse was great. The whole band was great. And I really enjoyed that one. So they get my vote for the best concert of 2018. Now, in terms of the concert that I wish I had seen in 2018 that I didn't get a chance to, I would have to give that to Iron Maiden and their Legacy of the Beast tour. And the only reason why I didn't get to see it is because it didn't come to the States. But that's going to change next year. I've actually already got my ticket for next summer, so I will be checking them out. I'll have a review, of course, here on this channel when that time comes. You know, Iron Maiden, you know, they're one of these bands that has the luxury of being able to put out a new album. The fans eat it up, and they'll play the whole album live. And the fans will go see it, and they'll still sell tickets. You know, not many bands can put a new album out, and they, you know, the band can play the whole thing live, and the fans are chomping at the bit to hear it. You know, you don't really get that. Iron Maiden is a unique band at this point in their career, and you know, they'll turn around from that and they'll do a retro tour. You know, where they'll just go and say, all right, well, now we're going to play, you know, stuff from the 80s, and this, you know, it's just great that they can switch gears and the fans are right there with them. And so this whole Legacy of the Beast is a retro tour. So I'm very much looking forward to, of course, seeing the classic stuff. Let me know if there's any tours that you may have missed last year or this past year, and drop them down below. All right, so that brings me to my favorite DVD, a Blu-ray release of 2018, and that's going to go to these guys right here, King Crimson. This is Meltdown live in Mexico City 2017. This is really, really, really good. I'm a huge fan of Crimson, and they're celebrating 50 years next year. It's hard to believe. I think that despite their age, they are one of the most exciting bands out there. They break all the rules. I mean, Robert Fripp, within the past few years, totally imploded the band. He got rid of Adrian Belew, who had been in the band since the 80s, and just restructured the whole thing. They now have 3 drummers. How many bands do you know of that have 3 drummers, right? And that, not only are there 3 of them, but they're all on the front row. I mean, normally the front row is for, like, you know, the lead singer, the lead guitar player, the bass player. You know, they're on the back row, and the drummers take center stage, and it's a very percussive lineup. And the way that they all flow together and play together and work off of each other, they're looking at each other, and it's just an amazing performance. And this Blu-ray is beautiful, lots of different angles, there's lots of extra, you know, bonus stuff, and I can't recommend it enough. If you are a King Crimson fan, then what the hell are you waiting for? You should have one of these yourself. So definitely check it out. And I'd like to know, what was your favorite DVD Blu-ray that came out this past year? Drop it down below. All right, so before we get into the next one, I just want to let you guys know that I've got a companion playlist going filled with all the music that I'm talking about here, so you can easily go check this stuff out. You know, maybe there's something in there that you'll like. All right, up next is going to be my favorite cover song of 2018. You know, is there a song that you heard covered this past year that really blew you away? I know for me, it was Hearing Close to the Edge by Yes, covered by Band Geek. And I've done a video on this, talked about this quite a bit, so I'm not going to go into the whole backstory as to what these guys are all about. You should definitely check it out. But the video that I made got back to Band Geek. They gave me props on their Facebook page, which got me some new fans, and I know that I turned them on to some new fans. And so, you know, it's been really great to watch these guys because they're so talented. Just a great collective of friends who are just like these multi-instrumentalists, great vocalists, and they sure do know how to cover a song properly and give it its due. And I've never really heard Close to the Edge covered as well as this. You know, Anne-Marie Castellano, who is on vocals, was amazing. And I think that she makes the case that if you're not going to have John Anderson in Yes, maybe they should have a female lead singer. You know, what do you think about that? She certainly did the song justice. And I really haven't heard them haven't heard Yes perform Close to the Edge as good as this in quite some time. So definitely, if you're a fan of Yes, you want to check out Close to the Edge by Band Geek, all right? And then, of course, there's the worst cover of 2018, which I would have to easily give to Weezer for their cover of Toto's Africa. And I did a video for this and would have never expected at that time that this cover version would have exploded the way that it did. I mean, look at what's happened. We've had Weezer started to perform the song live on television. Then they made a proper video for it. I think Weird Al is even in it. And they perform this song now in their sets, Africa by Toto. And Toto even returned the favor, and they covered a Weezer song. They covered a song called Hash Pipe, which I had forgotten about that song. It's actually a cool one. Toto did a good version of it. I don't think it's as good as Weezer's. I think that song needs that youthful angst that only Weezer can bring. And but you can see how there's this bromance now between Toto and Weezer. And actually, there's been another cover of Africa that came out recently by Pitbull, the pop star. And I really wouldn't call that a cover. He basically lifted the hook from Africa and then put it into a lame-o, pop song. But that's par for the course nowadays. But anyway, was there a cover that you heard this year that you didn't like? Be sure to drop it down below in the comments. All right, so up next is going to be my favorite music video of 2018, and I have to give that to Muse for a song called Something Human, which is off their new album Simulation Theory. Now, Muse, for the past few years, have been going into more of a pop direction, and they're still kind of mining that territory. This song is definitely a more stripped back, kind of acoustical kind of song, but I think it works really, really well. It's a very divisive song. I've heard a lot of fans of the band not like this because of what I just said, but I don't really mind when a band takes a detour and changes things up a bit. And in terms of the video, I think that it's visually stunning. I just like the whole time travel aspect of it, and the whole turning into a werewolf I thought was really, really cool. It kind of reminded me of Back to the Future. And so that's my pick for the best video. Have you seen any this year that you really enjoyed? Be sure to drop it down below and let me know. And of course, the worst music video that I've seen in 2018 was a song called Powerful Man by 3.2. And if you don't know what the hell I'm talking about, if you're a fan of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, you'll remember this band called 3 that came out in the late 80s. It was comprised of Keith Emerson, Carl Palmer, and Robert Berry. And they had this song called Talkin' About, which was pretty cool. It was a hit at like rock radio. They went on tour and it was a flop, and the whole thing kind of collapsed. It went away quickly. And there had been talk between Robert Berry and Keith Emerson about doing a follow-up album, and they actually began work on it, doing a lot of demos back and forth and everything, until Keith Emerson committed suicide, and that kind of put everything on ice. And Robert Berry decided that he was going to see it through. So he put out this new album this year called 3.2, which was supposed to be a follow-up to the 3 album. It does not feature Keith Emerson on the album because they never got to record tracks, but it does feature Robert Berry kind of reinterpreting what Keith Emerson had done in the demos. And it also has some songs where Berry is kind of playing the way he thought Keith would have played. So he kind of tried to fill in the gaps. It was kind of, you want to call it kind of like a love letter to Keith Emerson, just kind of a thank you and a goodbye. And from what I've heard of the album, it's actually better than the last album. The first 3 album I thought was, for the most part, garbage. And this album sounds like it's got a little bit more substance to it, but I can't really give too much of an opinion because I really didn't give it a good ear. But I do know that the video for Powerful Man is probably the worst, one of the worst I've seen. It was like, what kind of budget do we have? Well, I got some lint in my pocket. How much will that get me? And it seems like they kind of settled on using stock images and like royalty-free stuff just to get through it. I mean, just awful. So I'll put a link to that, of course. That'll be in the playlist. You might want to check that out, especially, you know, if you're a fan of Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and if you liked that 3 album, you definitely want to check out 3.2, all right? All right, so up next is my most memorable television music moment in 2018, and that would have to be Paul McCartney on Carpool Karaoke with James Corden. And of course, if you don't know, James Corden is a late-night television show host here in the States. He's got this feature in his show called Carpool Karaoke, where he basically drives around with these artists, and they sing and they tell stories and laugh it up and all that stuff. And there's been some memorable ones, like the Red Hot Chili Peppers episode was really, really good. And the one with Paul McCartney that he did this past year was really, really touching. And there were some interesting things going on there. They went to this house where Paul McCartney grew up, and he even wrote some songs with John Lennon there. So there were some interesting stories there. Then Paul McCartney's band goes to this pub, and they're behind this curtain. And the people that are in the pub don't know that McCartney's there, so they go to the jukebox to play a song, and the curtain opens, and McCartney's band plays, and then the curtain closes when the song's over. And that was really fun. So that whole episode I would recommend, and like I said, it'll be in the playlist that is going along with this video. I'll have a link to it down below. And this brings me to the saddest news of 2018. And I'm not talking about death. That's coming up later. I'm talking about an artist getting some bad news that affects their ability to do what they love. And I would have to give this to Huey Lewis. He got some bad news earlier this year from his doctor. He was advised not to sing, not to perform, because his hearing has deteriorated. And I did a whole video about this. You should check it out. I'll put a link up to it where I talk more about what's going on. But basically, Huey Lewis is sidelined and not able to perform live. And it's really not clear if he's going to be able to, if this is something that's going to turn around, or if he's just not going to be able to sing again. That kind of remains to be seen. And next on my list, as part of the best of 2018, is going to be the best documentary that I saw in 2018. And that's going to be Dave Grohl's Play, which was really a 2-part mini doc, which took a look at his recording of a 20-minute plus instrumental, this idea that he had where he wanted to do this instrumental piece where he plays all the instruments. And not only that, but it's filmed. And not only that, but it's filmed in one take. So there's no overdubs. And it was quite an amazing, ambitious piece of music that he wound up doing. And it was inspired by children. It was inspired by kids who, you know, just have this thirst for learning and for playing and for doing something that they've never done before. And Dave kind of felt like a lot of people tend to lose this as they get, 20, 30 years into their careers. And he wanted to do something that took him out of his comfort zone that he had never done before. And that's what Play was. And I think it was an amazing song. And the documentary is really cool too. So I would recommend you check that out. And that brings me to the best reunion of 2018. And I would have to give that to Foreigner. I mean, this is a band that's come a long, long way, let me tell you. The former lead singer, Lou Gramm, had a brain tumor. He had an operation that kind of sidelined him. He wasn't quite the same, but he's been gradually getting back into it, singing with his solo band. Mick Jones has even had his share of health issues, to the point where there were many nights where Foreigner would go out without any original members. Mick Jones couldn't even show up, but the band went on. And so I think that Mick Jones and Lou Gramm kind of realized that this isn't going to go on forever, that they should put aside differences and get back and try to make this work in some way. And it wasn't just them two. They brought the entire family back. Whoever was left in Foreigner, there's only one guy that passed away a number of years ago, but for the most part, the family of Foreigner is intact, and they all got together and they performed. They performed at Sturgis, which is a bike, like a biker event. It happens annually. They performed there, went really, really well. They even added some more dates. And so it was really good to see them all performing with each other. They're all happy doing it. And it just goes to show you what can be achieved when you put egos and money and all that bullshit on the side and you do what's best for yourselves and for the fans. And so I got to give props to Foreigner for that. All right, so that brings me to the worst interview that I saw in 2018, and I would have to give this to Styx and the big interview with Dan Rather. And the problem with the interview wasn't Dan. I actually like Dan. He's a veteran news guy, and he knows how to interview people. I mean, I saw him do some great ones with Sammy Hagar and Geddy Lee and Rush, and even the one with Gene Simmons that he did last year, I thought was the best interview I'd ever seen with Gene. But the one with Styx, you know, it's just Tommy and JY just bitching and moaning a lot about Dennis. And they ought to be grateful to him for the name Styx that, you know, they took the band from Dennis. You know, Dennis got sick and he couldn't perform. JY and Tommy, they just took the band and they just went on their way. And the only reason why they were able to do that is because of what Dennis built for them. You know, of course they were a team and it wasn't all Dennis, but Dennis was a major reason why that band was very, very popular and why the Styx name carries so much weight now. It has a lot to do with Dennis. And I just don't like the way Tommy was sitting there and JY and they were just bashing Dennis and talking about him like he's some kind of an asshole. When I think we really know who the assholes are. And I've already done videos about this. I'm not going to go into it more, but I just thought that the interview with Tommy Shaw was pretty shitty, the way that he kept knocking on Dennis. But they don't really care a whole lot when they're going to the bank and cashing their checks, do they? Now, my favorite interview of 2018 would have to go to Rick Allen. He did this great interview with Signed Media. And despite the fact that the interviewer seems kind of clueless, Rick Allen did a great job really talking about the whole experience he had with losing his arm in the car accident back in '85 and what that meant for him to lose his arm, being a drummer and getting to a place where he could start to experiment and play drums again, and how the band reacted, and it was a really interesting interview. I really enjoyed it, and again, it drives home, as I've talked about before in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame video, how Def Leppard are really a bunch of stand-up guys, a really good brotherhood. They were there for Rick, and they never belittled him. They never made him feel like he was less, and they never went on without him, and that whole time in that band was just an amazing feat when you think about it, how they got through it. And so I would encourage you to check that out if you're a fan of Def Leppard. You want to see that interview with Rick Allen. I'll put a link to it in the companion playlist, which you can find below. All right, so that brings us to the best song of 2018. Now, this song, I think, was a breakthrough for this band. And I don't think that this is necessarily the best song that was released in the entire year. It's just what the song meant to this band, I think, is why it's the best song of 2018. And it's going to be Dance Macabre from Ghost. It's a very divisive song, kind of like, I Was Made for Loving You by Kiss. One of those types of things where the band just all of a sudden goes into this decidedly pop direction. Ghost is a doom metal band that has satanic overtones. And so the last thing you would ever expect them to do would be to put out a top 40 song, a song that sounded like, it was just made for pop radio. It's not in keeping with their image. Even though Ghost has a very melodic side to them that kind of reminds you of 70s classic rock. Dance Macabre was definitely a very obvious step into a pop-oriented direction. And even though it does this, I think it was done so well that it got Ghost in front of a bunch of whole new fans. They gained a lot of fans as a result of this song and of this album than if they had just done what people had expected them to do and just put out another one of their albums, which I'm not saying that their albums haven't been good. They obviously have been because they've been building a fan base, but this was just like spreading, just like throwing gasoline onto a fire, really. I mean, this band exploded. Like all of a sudden now, Ghost is, one of the biggest bands out there. And so I got to give credit to the song Dance Macabre. I think it's a song that's connected with a lot of people. It has a lot of things that kind of remind you of what made songs from the 80s great. It's got really good hooks, really good guitar solos in it, nice, just a lot of nice melodic stuff that you don't get from a lot of rock bands, especially hard rock bands. And so I think that it's Song of the Year based on what it means. We're basically witnessing a cult band here turn into a more popular band. Now what this means going into the future, what's the next album going to sound like, don't really know. Don't know how this is going to affect them going forward, but for the time being, Dance Macabre and this new album, Prequel, that they just put out, really has opened them up. And it's, gotten them in front of a whole new audience, and it'd be interesting to see what happens to them. So I think that Dance Macabre is a very important song for Ghost. And so now we're going to talk about the album of the year. And again, this is an album that I don't think it is necessarily the best album that came out. I even did a review of this album. But I think in terms of what it means for this band is really what I'm trying to get at here. And what I'm talking about is Anthem of the Peaceful Army by Greta Van Fleet. Now, as you know, I've done a review of this album. I was kind of disappointed by it. I think that, it's got some good stuff on it. You can tell that they put a lot of work into it. It has a 70s classic rock work ethic to it. You can definitely tell. But I just think that there's a lot of songs on here that are just kind of weak and forgettable. However, as a whole, I think that the album is very important in a couple of ways. First of all, I think it was really cool how the album was marketed and how there was a lot of buildup. I mean, they were releasing songs from this album many months before it actually came out. We didn't even know when the album was coming. There was a lot of secrecy around the album title, around when it was going to come, the anticipation that was built for this album. I don't know if it was intentional or if it just kind of worked out like that, but I thought that the whole marketing thing that went into this album, it really whipped fans up to the point where when it came out, it did very, very well. I mean, in its first week, it was the biggest selling album. And it even sold more copies than Gaga. And so when you can knock Gaga out, then I think you've done a pretty good job, especially if it's a rock album, a rock and roll album. And so I got to give them props for performing well and for doing a good job whipping up fans and at putting a lot of time into it. I can tell that there was a lot of work put into it. So that's why I give it Album of the Year. What album do you think deserves this? Be sure to comment below and let me know. And so now it's time I reveal my most popular video of 2018. And I gotta tell you, when I first uploaded this, I had no idea that it would become so popular. It's gotten like well over 11,000 views. I never even made a follow-up to it, just because I never really wanted to. It just was a topic I just talked about once and I was done with it. And it was a video called, I Just Want to Know What's Up with Vinnie Vincent. And it's kind of funny, when at the beginning of this episode, I was talking about Steve Perry and how he, this was a guy that was gone for 20 years and people were kind of wondering where he was and how many other artists out there were gone for 20 years that could come back and anybody would care. And, Vinnie Vincent is one of those. Now, granted, he's not a household name like Steve Perry. There's a lot of people who don't even know who the hell Vinnie Vincent is or don't give a shit. But for those of you who don't know, Vinnie Vincent was a guitarist in Kiss. He replaced Ace Frehley, and he was around during the pivotal time where the makeup came off. And he actually had his own makeup. He was the Ankh warrior. And so after he left Kiss, and he had the Vinnie Vincent Invasion albums that he did, he pretty much went away, and he was gone for a long time, many, many years. People wondering where he was, what he was doing, would he ever come back again? And then there was this documentary that came out in Europe not too long ago that speculated that he was living as a woman now. And, that really got the rumor mills churning, because Vinnie had always been kind of effeminate, and there was always something a little bit off with him. And so this news kind of wasn't too shocking. And then what was really shocking was when he surfaces after 20 years or whatever it was, he looks like a woman, like he's dresses like a frumpy woman, and he's got some makeup on, it looked like. And so the questions started to come out, like what's going on with Vinnie? And that's all I was asking in that video. A lot of people didn't like the fact that I was even asking that question, but these people just need to get over it. When you're in the public eye, it's fair game to be asking questions. And it's really not so much a matter of, is he a woman or not, or does he want, I could give a shit. It's really how it's being handled, because there's just some, like I said, the documentary comes out about him maybe being a woman, and then he comes back kind of looking like a woman. The way that it's handled, the way that he's handling the whole thing is kind of intriguing. And he even mentioned in an interview that he didn't want to address it, that he wanted to have this kind of a mystique about it. And that kind of even strikes me as a bit odd. Like, if you're a straight guy, you don't want any mystique. Like, I want to set the record straight here. And so the handling of it is what really was fascinating. And I think a lot of people as well are fascinated by it, because like I said, it's gotten a shitload of views. And so thank you for checking that out. In terms of what Vinnie is actually doing nowadays, he was supposed to have a show. He had a whole concert lined up for earlier this month in Memphis, but it got postponed. There was some issue with the lead singer, Robert Fleischman. He backed out of it after Carmine Appice and Tony Franklin came on board to basically, be his backing band. Carmine and Tony, you may recall, were in a band called Blue Murder back in the 80s with John Sykes. Tony Franklin was even in the band called The Firm. You may recall that was a band with Jimmy Page. He was the bass player in that band. Carmine and Tony are really, really good. And who knows what's going to happen with this show. It's been rescheduled for Nashville now in February 8th and 9th. And, I wouldn't be shocked if it fell through, just because Vinnie Vincent is very unreliable and you never know what could happen with him. But for right now, it's going to be in Nashville at this place called Rocket Town. I was in Nashville for years, and I never went to Rocket Town. I just never saw anything worthwhile coming through there. I think it holds like 600 people. So not the best of venues in that area, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. Let me know what you think about this whole Vinnie Vincent thing. If you have any opinions on it, you can drop it down below. So there you go. A lot of my best and worsts for 2018. Let me know what you think. All right, so now I want to run through my top songs of 2018. These are songs that I've been listening to for the past year. Some of them may have come out late last year because they came out in advance of the album that came out in 2018. For the most part, these songs lived in 2018. I tend to listen to, there's some like mainstream stuff that's come out, no top 40. I'm not into the top 40 stuff. And there's a lot of hard rock and metal that I'm just not into. To me, a lot of it just sounds very generic and bland and boring. I tend to listen to a lot of indie stuff, independent label, independent artists. I find that there's a lot more creativity there. But basically, going to run through this list. If there's anything that you really got off on this year, let me know. Drop it below, and I will definitely check it out. All right, so number one on the list. This is in no particular order, okay? Number one is Myles Kennedy. He is a great singer, probably one of the best singers in rock out there now. And he finally put out a solo album, and this great song called Year of the Tiger, which, is about the loss of his father. That's what this album's about how his family dealt with the loss of his father. And, it's more of an acoustical kind of album. It's not a hard rock album, what you would expect him to be doing, because when he's not doing this solo stuff, he is working with Slash. He's the lead singer in his band, and he also is a lead singer in this band called Alter Bridge, which is basically Creed. You may recall that band, minus Scott Stapp, who was the lead singer, who I think was the biggest problem in that band. I always hated Creed, and especially Scott Stapp, could not take him. So any band without Scott and you add in Myles, all right in my book, all right? Up next is a band called First Aid Kit. They are a Swedish duo. To these two sisters, and I think they're really great singers, great songwriters, very, very talented, and they have this great song called It's a Shame that I really, really like from this past year. Also, Pearl Charles, she's an indie artist, and I really like this song of hers called Sleepless Dreamer. I think it's a very well-written song, really nice melodies. I like the guitar work in it, and I just think it's a very solid indie pop kind of song. Up next is a track by Mikky Ekko called Not the One. I really like that. And then I also like a song called Yours by Now Now. That's definitely some indie pop. Now taking a bit of a different direction. I've seen this with some bands, where they are going along a certain path, and all of a sudden they come out with something like, wow, that's really poppy. Kind of like with Ghost. Muse did it a few years back when they put out Madness. And so I think Yours is like that for Now Now. A lot of people probably don't know who the hell I'm talking about, but they're an indie artist. Then up next, Slotface. This great song called Night Guilt. I like the bass line in it. I like the melody. To me, it's a really, really cool song. Also, Johnny Marr this year, he was the guitarist in the Smiths. He put out another solo album, and Johnny Marr had this great song called Hi Hello. And to me, it harkens back to the Smiths. I think it's a shame that he and Morrissey can't get together and do something. It would really sound good, I think, because they're still both, really performing well, both of these artists. And so, Johnny Marr, I think, had a really good album this time out, and Hi Hello is a really cool song. Then there's a song I really like called I Was a Fool by Sunflower Bean. Great lead vocal. I like the guitar work, really good bass line in it. Really cool song. Also, Steve Perry and We're Still Here. Great song from his Traces album, which I talked about earlier. This one in particular to me really reminds me of a ballad that could have been on a Journey album. It sounds like something that could have been on Street Talk, like a early Perry solo album or something. It's just got a really strong melody, and it's quality, and you can just tell that this song evokes quality, what you would expect from classic Perry. So that's, I think, one of the best songs that came out. Also, I'm a fan of this band called Krungbin. And if you take a look at their name, you wouldn't know how the hell to pronounce it. And they even admitted that if they had known that they were going to become, not a household name, but as popular as they have been lately, that they would have not have called themselves Krungbin. But they're like this, I don't know what you would call it. It sounds like Thai pop, psychedelic mixed with fusion, and I don't know. It's definitely a unique kind of sound. And again, that's why I like listening to indie bands, is because you get a band like Krungbin, which is totally different than anything that I'm hearing. If you turn on the radio, or even listening to like modern rock or melodic rock and heavy metal, a lot of that stuff to me just sounds the same. Krungbin, they're very, very unique, and you might want to check that out. Like I said, a companion video to this video is going to have all these songs in it, so you can check them out. Also, Natalie Prass. She actually is from around here. She's from Richmond, and she has a cool song called Short Court Style. It kind of reminds me of Janet Jackson from like maybe the 80s, the late 80s or something. That's a pretty cool song. Also, I've been digging this song by Karen O and Danger Mouse called Lux Prima. And it's like a 9-minute song. It's really chilled and it's really cool. Karen O, of course, is the lead singer in this band called the Yeah Yeah Yeahs. And Danger Mouse is, he's worked with a bunch of people. He's also in this band called the Shins. That's also cool. Paul McCartney had a new album out this year called Egypt Station. And the album was pretty typical fare for Paul McCartney. It wasn't bad. I don't think it was great. It was okay. It had some pretty cool stuff on it. A lot of forgettable stuff. I mean, let's face it. He has written some of the best songs of our lifetime. So for him to put out a mediocre album, and he's 80 practically, I'll give it to him. But one song on this album that I really liked was a song called I Don't Know, and it was one of the singles that came out in advance. And I think that it's a really cool, heartfelt, kind of a sad song, but I don't know. I kind of feel it. There's something in that song that I really, really like. Also like this song by Low Moon called Real Love. This song kind of, for me, it harkens back to something that could have come out of the 80s. It's just got that kind of a sound quality to it, that kind of a melody. And then there's a couple of songs that kind of remind me of 90s alternative. One by Snail Mail called Heat Wave. And then there's another by Soccer Mommy. She had a song called Your Dog that came out earlier this year. Also the Jungle Giants with Used to Be in Love. I really like that song. That's kind of a real poppy song, like an indie pop kind of tune. Reminds me again of an 80s, something that could have come from an 80s era, you know, and I don't mind it when bands tap into that vibe. They're not copying anything specifically. They're not lifting anything, stealing anything. They're just kind of recapturing a vibe that we used to have, and I really do appreciate that. Then there's U.S. Girls with the song called Rosebud that I liked. This kind of reminds me of like a Madonna song or something from maybe the late 80s or the early part of the 90s. Then there's this new band called the Fearless Flyers. They're pretty interesting. You ought to check them out. Really good instrumentalists. I mean, we're talking about breakneck speed. I don't know what you would describe their music as. It's, I don't know. Off the top of my head, I really can't put into words what it is, but the musicianship, the bass guitar, the electric, the drums, everything is so tight and kinetic and very fast playing and really just will blow your mind. You might want to check that out. Lenny Kravitz had a new album this year, and I thought I was kind of underwhelmed by it, actually. I don't think it was a very good album, but there was a good song on it called It's Enough. I think that it kind of harkens back to the Marvin Gaye, like What's Going On, kind of political stuff that he was doing. Curtis Mayfield. It's got a really good groove. It's like 8 minutes or something. I really did enjoy that song. Then there was this interesting song that was dropped by Trevor Rabin of Yes, or ARW, whatever you want to call them, called Fragile. It's a song that he had just kind of sitting around. It was a leftover from a TV project that he had been working on, and he got John Anderson to sing on it and Rick Wakeman to play on it too. And there's supposed to be a whole album coming out at some point, but Trevor Rabin dropped this song called Fragile during a radio interview on Jonesy's Jukebox, and I thought it was a really beautiful song. And so you might want to check that out. If you're a Yes fan, you definitely want to listen to that one. Then there's Greta Van Fleet. Of course, they put out their debut album this year, Anthem of the Peaceful Army. And I think the album had some standout tracks, particularly Lover Leaver. That's a great, great song. And I was going to make that my song of the year, but I thought that Dance Macabre from Ghost meant more in terms of what it did for the band. But also Watching Over is a great song from the new Greta Van Fleet album too. And supposedly they're working on their next album, which should be out next year. So we'll see about that. And then there was a new album from Ghost this year called Prequel, which had some really good stuff on it. It also had some pretty shitty stuff on it too. I think the album overall was a bit of a letdown, but songs like Faith and Rats and Dance Macabre, I think, were the best songs on that album. And so I would definitely recommend those as a part of my best of 2018. And also Judas Priest had a new album out this year called Firepower. And a great song on that album called No Surrender. Firepower has been recognized by a lot of Judas Priest fans as, you know, being a very solid album. A lot of fans happy with it. And I think Priest has shown that they still have some gas in their tank. And then finally is a band called Why Not? And they started off as a Rush tribute band, which they actually are, but their first album came out this year, and it is an album filled with originals. And the thing about Why Not is that even in their originals, there's a lot of stuff in it that sounds like familiar Rush songs. Like you can't quite place that riff. It sounds like you heard that riff before, but not quite that way. There's a lot of that going on. There's a lot of the same tone. The band's got great tone. The lead guitarist is really, really good and has a lot of the same kind of tone that Alex Lifeson has. And one of the things that I like about this band is when they're covering Rush, they're able to capture a lot of the emotion that comes with Rush's playing, because that's one of the things that I found that was missing with a lot of these Rush tribute bands, or in bands that try to cover Rush, is that they may play the notes, but the emotion is not there. And Why Not is able to keep the emotion, which I think is very important. Plus, they've also got a female lead singer, which I think is kind of interesting. I don't know that I've ever heard a Rush tribute band with a female lead. Usually they have these guys with these really high-pitched voices, kind of like with this band called Lotus Land, which is a Rush tribute band. They're kind of recognized as being the top Rush tribute band. But this one's got a female lead, and I think it works in a lot of instances. And they have this, like I said, this new album that came out, and this one song that I really like called Etheria. It kind of reminds me of Headlong Flight from the Clockwork Angels album. It's got a similar bass line, similar guitar thing going on. There's even an instrumental on the album called Why Not? And it sounds like a mixture of a bunch of familiar Rush themes you just can't place. And it's really interesting. They're a really cool band. Actually, they've been noticed by Getty and Alex. They recently picked up a couple of copies of their debut album too. And so, you know, they're a band that's been gaining steam, and they've been playing live a lot. And so interesting to see where they go. And you might want to check them out. If you're a Rush fan, you've got to check out Why Not? I think you will really, really dig it. Anyway, that is my exhaustive rear end review of the Year in Music 2018. I hope you liked it. Maybe there's something here that you know, you may not have heard before that you may like. If there's something that you want to share with me that you enjoyed from this past year, be sure to drop it down below and let me know. I would love to hear something that you enjoyed this year. And I love it when we can kind of turn each other on, if you know what I mean. So definitely do that. And be sure to give this video a thumbs up if you like it. It really helps to get this video in front of other people who may also enjoy it. Hit that subscribe button too. Thank you for all the comments, all the views, everything that you guys did in 2018. And next year is another year. We'll see what is going to happen. As a matter of fact, my next video, which is going to be my first video of 2019, is going to be a look at what we can expect in terms of new albums, in terms of tours, in 2019. So be sure to check that out shortly. So thank you again, and Happy New Year, and I'll be seeing you soon. Take care.